How should I format my thumb drive? Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for askleo.com. Here's a question I got. I always use KeePass installed on a USB stick. I bought a new stick for this purpose. It's formatted as FAT32. Can I leave it like that, or do I have to change it to FAT64 or NTFS? Well, we can rule out one of those right away. There is no such thing as FAT64. I'll talk about that in a bit. But let's review some of the alternatives and consider when you might want to switch. The discussion here applies primarily to USB thumb drives and memory cards such as SD cards, micro SD cards, and the like. I'm going to refer to them all as USB thumb drives just for this video. External hard disks, both HDD and SSD, are often used in ways that allow us to make slightly different decisions that can actually improve performance. I'll talk about that in a second. What's a file system? File systems are how the bits and bytes of your data are organized on a disk. The type of file system is selected and initialized when you format a disk. Let's use a reference book as an analogy. As with most analogy, this relies on gross oversimplification, and it's not intended to describe the details of how disks work, but rather it's a way to understand the many possible differences between file systems and how they organize their data. Regardless of the information in a reference book, it can be laid out and augmented in many different ways. Some books include just a table of contents. Some have an index at the back. Some include footnotes at the bottom of every page. Others put those footnotes at the end of each chapter or even at the end of the book. And of course, some have no footnotes at all. Some use large text and wide margins, resulting in less information per page, while others cram a lot of words onto each. Some books are in color and have pictures, others don't. In other words, the same information can be published in a variety of different ways. They offer the same data, but with different characteristics. Now, the same is true with file systems. They all store data, but they organize it differently. The three most common file systems you're likely to encounter are FAT32, exFAT, and NTFS. FAT32, which is File Allocation Table, 32-bit, is the oldest and perhaps the simplest of the three. Think of it as a reference book with only a table of contents. Because it's been around longer, it dates all the way back to MS-DOS and Windows 95, it's by far the most compatible file system. All versions of Windows support it, and so do almost all other operating systems and devices that use disks. It's well suited to transferring data between different devices, such as your camera, your phone, your Mac, your PC, or your Linux computer. Individual files on a FAT32 formatted drive are limited to 4 gigabytes in size. This limitation is becoming perhaps the most common reason that other formats might be used. When in doubt, FAT32 is usually a fine choice for thumb drives, and it's probably what I would recommend for your use of KeePass. exFAT, extensible FAT, is an attempt at a compromise, a FAT-like file system that could be supported with minimal changes to the existing FAT32 supporting software. Think of this as our original FAT32 reference book with an index added and printed on perhaps bigger, easier-to-read paper. exFAT is optimized specifically for flash-based disks and is becoming the standard default file system for memory cards over 32 gigabytes. It also supports individual file sizes well in excess of that 4 gigabyte FAT32 limitation. You might think then that exFAT would be a great choice for a USB thumb drive or a memory card. And it is, except if you need to use that thumb drive on another device as well. While exFAT compatibility is good, it's still not uncommon to run across other devices, like older cameras, for example, that don't support it. Current versions of major operating systems, including Windows, Mac OS, and most Linux distributions, do support it. exFAT is a fine choice if you'll know that you're going to be handling files larger than 4 gigabytes or only using the thumb drive with more or less modern devices. NTFS, New Technology File System. was introduced with Windows NT and is the default file system used by Windows. The Windows system drive, typically your C drive, must be formatted with NTFS. Think of it as a reference book with all the bells and whistles, tables of contents, index, bibliography, footnotes, annotations, and probably more. NTFS is optimized for fast, reliable, and perhaps most importantly, multi-user access. While exFAT and FAT32 don't really have a concept of permissions other than generic read-only, hidden, and system attributes, NTFS supports a robust, complex, and complete set of access control at the user account and group level that can allow or deny read and write access separately, as well as access to many other characteristics. NTFS carries much more overhead information as compared to exFAT and FAT32. NTFS is an okay choice for Thumbdrive that you expect to use only with Windows systems. But honestly, there's really little reason to incur the overhead. Everything I've talked about so far is focused on interchangeable thumb drives, those that you might use to transfer data from one machine or device to another. If the thumb drive, or particularly an external hard disk, is going to be connected to a single machine continuously, like a drive used to hold backups, you might make some different choices. External drives more or less permanently connected to a Windows machine should probably be formatted NTFS. This enables the permissions model and is used by some backup programs to implement protection against ransomware if the drive is being used to hold backups. For Macs, Apple's own APFS is generally the best choice if the drive is to be connected continuously to a Mac for a bunch of the same reasons. On Linux, ext4 is the Linux native file system, and once again, it's a likely choice for an external drive that will only be used with a Linux machine. Now, full disclosure, I have a Linux machine in my basement that I have a bunch of drives connected to, more or less permanently. But I've got them formatted NTFS specifically because I want the option to connect them to a Windows machine if I need to. All right, what happened to FAT64? FAT64 never existed. While we think of the operating system as being 32-bit or 64-bit, that's a characteristic of the CPU inside of your computer, which operates on data either 32 or 64 bits at a time. When it comes to file systems, the 32 in FAT32 refers to the size of some information stored about the data on the drive. It's really not dependent in any way on the CPU. Limitations like the 4 gigabyte file size are a result of that 32 choice. I suppose one way to remove that limit might have been to move to a 64-bit based format, but it's likely that the structural differences would have been too great and would seriously impact storage efficiency and size as well as performance. Alternatives like NTFS and exFAT were developed instead. So, FAT32 is almost always a safe choice, unless you're dealing with large files, in which case exFAT should work just fine. For updates, for comments, for links related to this topic and more, visit askleo.com/124976. I'm Leo Notenboom, and this is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.